Hi, I'm LeiLani Cauthen, and welcome to our mid-year market briefing by the Learning Counsel. So the Learning Counsel is an organization that travels all over the country, and we have events called the Digital Curriculum Sustainability Discussions. I've been in about, now I think it's about 90 cities. We have about 16 cities more this fall that we're going to do, wrapping up the year with our national gathering. We're also launching our Learning Counsel learning groups this year to talk about some of the things that are going on in software. And trust me, there's a lot of change happening in the K12 education sector. We're even having some higher ed start to show up, curious about what's going on with technology transition in education. So what I'm going to show you today is a lot of data that we've collected through our various different surveys, and how we've interpreted that data is going to give you some idea about where the market's been and actually where it's going for digital curriculum, as well as every other type of technology that leans on that sort of discussion that's at the heart of education. That is what they teach and what they use to teach with, which is digital curriculum now more and more. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. So the first thing to show you is what's actually happening in education over time. So this is the first look at our longitudinal education market data over all the years that we've been doing the survey. So the interesting thing to know is the market overall, and this is K12 and higher ed, is significantly down. It's down in terms of overall spend, but I'm going to tell you the reasons why that is and why we think it's turning around. So the K12 non-digital curriculum spend is also on the decline. It's a flat market this year. We're at a year that's stagnating in terms of which spend pattern a school district decides to go down, and I'm going to explain that. But the number one thing I want you to look at is the K12 digital curriculum spend, and that is very slightly down this year overall. And one of the reasons for that is these other two graphics you can see in the same slide, the shift from one method of purchase to another method. There's been a lot of teacher purchase going on in the market for a really long time, but now all of the districts that we talk to and the schools themselves are reining in how the spend is done to centralize it. That's because they want to have an actual curriculum map across everything that they're doing. And that doesn't mean that every teacher gets to use a different program and they lose all negotiation ability for district-wide purchase because they've got everybody on the same page. It's also a loss of predictability in what's going to happen with the kids, because as they're learning in different programs all over the place, it's actually causing a bit more disruption than people intended to create when they were embedding technology in. So if you look at those two numbers, one of the reasons that we think we're at that point of inertia is because the whole market is sort of shifting feet from a lot of teacher purchase to a lot more district purchase, and they're in that middle part of the confusion as to actually how they're going to mature their overall digital curriculum map. An estimated $2.28 billion has actually left the market. Now, the natural rate of growth, that includes the natural rate of growth without the loss to open education resources. So there's been a lot of slow adoption rate in the national K12 and higher ed markets for professional content, whether paper or digital resources, and that figure is adjusted for the normal rate of inflation over the last 4 years, averaging about 2%. The other loss to the market is a result of the failed digital programs ruining the potentials for others and stagnating purchase. So what that means is that people adopted certain software programs and then they maybe didn't implement them right, they didn't onboard all their teachers right, and they ended up sort of running away from that program saying this doesn't work, this is horrible, and that's actually creating stagnation for other software companies who then are trying to come in and maybe even bring better stuff to the market. So the other loss is the failed budget transfer to digital. A lot of districts are citing the fact that they haven't actually moved their paper purchase budgets into digital. They've been sort of hoping for the best in digital or trying to do all free stuff without actually moving budgets. So overall, the market is in a short point of inertia. It's leaving that earlier adopters stage who have mostly purchased, major systems with very little content purchase in ratio to their old habits, and it enters a wider sales shift with the early and the late majority of the market. So this holds far greater potential and is expected to double spend overall, leaving behind the 5 years of flat and dwindling spend by mid-2018 in a steep growth pattern. The reason for this is that the number of resources for self-build and all using open education resources for a full curriculum map are far fewer in the schools as we gain the bulk of the market. So reliance on purchase will be greater because the smaller the school district, the less they have people to dedicate to do all that work. In addition, self-build will deteriorate overall as schools gain greater understanding of its non-competitiveness against consumer-grade learning applications. So the next thing to tell you is that the K-12 market, again, is flipping from that teacher and discrete principal spend into institutional spend. Overall, the growth for digital is flat while print keeps dwindling. The market overall is at that point of inertia with the exception of full digital courseware. That's the only point where things are growing really fast. So I'm not talking about the entire digital curriculum market. I'm talking about the fully digital courseware part that is not necessarily individual objects. It's the things that are fully built so the kid just logs in and then they do the whole sequence all the way through. The market is generally in that conundrum of, do I systematize and self-build digital lessons or do I just buy consumer-grade courseware? As this is debated by them, or they default into make all their own stuff, and they just use the routes of least resistance such as the baseline communication software like Google or Microsoft, it's easily apparent to see that the market is moving, but it's not very sophisticated. So that maturity will come. At the same time, the higher ed market has dropped faster and reduced print spend and has lost a significant total volume for institutional spend. Student spend or aftermarket is not included in the total number. So the higher ed tends to spend far more on system solutions. They're really about these big framework solutions. There's very little consumer grade courseware exists in that market. So the fast loss is largely due to dependency on open education resource and the inflation rate, which is 2% average nationally. Typically, the government also lags, this is states and feds, 1 to 2 years behind the dips in the economy and how money was being taken in. So they pass a budget based on what they've already received in revenue, and then they spend forward. So that is one of the reasons why we're projecting a significant rise, because 2015 and 2016 were at least 1.5, almost 2% higher than the previous years in total inflation rate and GDP. If you look at where the market stands right now, and this is sort of an interesting view, K-12 Education's digital curriculum transition is really just leaving the early adoption of it, like the early part of the market, and starting to go into the early majority. That has many implications for how companies should be marketing to education. But basically, we're at the early stage, and we're catching fire basically going up that hill right now, and we should be seeing a huge swing in the next couple of years. The product growth spots include still a lot of devices being purchased, mostly Chromebooks, digital courseware. This is not necessarily courses, but it's the highly developed programs where you're just logging the kid in to do what they're supposed to be doing, and the program is doing the personalization. It's really a bright spot in the market. Special needs products, software products, and social emotional products, huge bright point in the market right now. K-5, any core programs, I mean, we're leaving the world of supplemental only, and we're moving into core need for K through 5, and anything that has to do with network build out, also a growth spot in the market. So the market overall is $16.2 billion on the hardware side, and that includes the major system software. That's the world of the learning management systems, the student information systems, the major assessment systems. That side of the market is experiencing a slight increase already in 2017. It's probably going to speed up as we go through the year and then get a little bit more of an uptick going into 2018. However, we think the software side, the digital curriculum side, is going to have a much stronger uptick at the back end of 2017 going into 2018. The other trend to make sure that you're aware of is the K-12 education market, which we started out saying was about $9.0 billion. We've downgraded it slightly as a mid-year adjustment to $8.9 billion. However, the back end of the year is going to see a stronger growth going into 2018 at 2.5% compound annual growth rate. But we always like to show you that number in comparison to what's happening on the consumer side of the market, which the straight to the consumer purchase, which is through the app markets and direct purchase for websites online, is already at $12.52 billion and growing at a much faster rate, and we think sort of catching fire into 2018. So that is really something to pay attention to. It's what we talk about in my book, The Consumerization of Learning. If you don't have it, you should get it, read it. The next thing to talk about is the fact that the consumerization It's the act of making something desirable and consumable by the individual. In education, we like to call it personalization. But as a trend, it means that the software field is becoming the dominant field in the education conversation, because how you actually arrive at that goal is where almost everyone is trying to drive to. How do they make something desirable and consumable by the individual? How do they impact learning for real with technology? And that gets into a much deeper software conversation. It's really what the Learning Counsel is all about. So in education, again, we call that personalization. The rest of the world, when they're looking at software, they're calling it consumerization. Okay, so the top 5 intentions of digital curriculum strategy over the last 3 years is sort of juggled back and forth between increased student engagement and greater instructor effectiveness. I want you to notice that 2015 and 2016 has been about greater instructor effectiveness, which is telling you a lot about what leadership really thinks about their teachers. So our analysis is that this market is still teacher-centric in their thinking as the learning delivery mechanism, while they're trying to shift to digital and at the same time individualize every lesson for every student. This is a nearly inhuman ask for every teacher to actually build every single standard, every lesson plan, and individualize it for every single student and then track all of that. There is new evidence showing that the continued pressure is actually sort of breaking teachers. The easier road for many teachers is just not doing it and moving into, okay, we're not going to really use the LMS. We're just going to use Google Docs or Office 365. And that's sort of showing up everywhere. We're hearing districts say, you know, we bought this expensive learning management system, but none of the teachers are really using it. I just want to make sure that I mention this. That's a sign of the immaturity of the bulk of the market, not those early adopters. But as we move into the bulk of the market, it's not as mature of a market. And it's going to take a little while to get them up to the point of thinking systems-wise. Right now, they're just sort of like, hey, lesson plans and digital, it's awesome. But they're not up to that maturity level of thinking as an organization. They're thinking in those individual points of light inside the classroom still. So that maturity will come. I don't think the learning management systems are going away anytime soon. I think that we're in a short point of inertia for particularly that sort of technology. The tools provided for digital content and curriculum is also an industry year-by-year comparison. Our analysis of it is that even though the number one thing is for schools to provide an email or communication system, it's been the same thing year over year. It's kind of showing a very low level of sophistication in terms of what tools they're providing as a starting point. Our analysis is that, again, the market is not systems thinking, and in comparison to other much more mature markets like insurance, healthcare, and banking, they've got a long way to go into how they think about how they're going to imbue the whole environment of education with technology. The issues preventing adoption of digital curriculum and content include, of course, the classroom pedagogy, professional development. Like, how do we get a teacher to actually use all this technology, and how do they transform that whole teaching learning paradigm to actually work seamlessly and sort of systemically across every digital lesson and everything that they're doing? That's the number one question we run into in every city. It's what people come up to us and sort of corner us and ask. And they're like, this is really great, but how do we get all of our teachers to actually do it? And so that kind of question actually comes up into the question of how leadership is being done in education. So right now, we see the market as dead center, that transition to digital curriculum in all its complexity. It's very complex, and that means we have to pull more of the top-ranked leadership into the conversation, because 80% of the schools in our survey also cited their budgets have not moved from paper-based resources into the digital side. That doesn't mean they weren't spending that money, but a lot of it was going to professional development. The problem with that is the professional development was still focused on the old paradigms of how you teach, just augmentatively sticking the technology into it, not through the software. So that's a little bit of a different sort of thing, and people are not really all on board with that yet. So we've got a little bit of ways to go. So the budgets are actually moved into digital coverage models when they actually get there, and we get past this unsustainable point of inertia. The market for digital is going to increase very dramatically because people will have a ready mindset to actually using it in the classroom. The ratio of free versus paid that's actually used in the school district is a really interesting switch. In 2014, there was, 14% of schools said they were using 100% free resources. In 2015 and 2016, 0% are using 100% free resources. There's a lot of a swing between, like, I'm using more than 75% paid versus I'm only using 50% paid. It's evenly divided. But what's actually happening is the market is moving away from free resources in the realization that free is not really free. Like we've heard in other cities as we tour the country, free is like a puppy. And I got a puppy recently, and it's not easy to raise a puppy. There's a lot of work involved. So that's just the same thing as free resources. There's a lot of work around them. There's a lot of curation. There's the upkeeping of them. And that reality is starting to settle into schools, and they're looking again at the publishers, but we're still in those early stages. 86% of schools expect purchase of digital curriculum to go up. That's the big positive that we see. And it also means that they're trying to move their curriculum maps in the direction of all digital coverage models. This is what digital courseware can look like. And I just wanted to show a few screenshots of what this looks like so that you have an understanding of what I mean by courseware versus a digital learning object. A digital learning object is something like a video or a PDF or a ebook. Digital curriculum, and particular courseware, knits multiple things together and gives you a pathway and sometimes embedded testing with that, and gives a student sort of different levels to operate in. Some of the digital collections for books already do this automatically, but a lot of the digital courseware is actually guiding you through standards-based lessons all the way to an endpoint while feeding back teacher analytics. That's what I mean by digital courseware, and that is the bright spot of the market. This is another piece of digital courseware. This is from Adaptive Curriculum. As you can see how realistic that is. It's almost like a real lab. This is from eDynamic. They have a full collection of digital courseware. And then you've got companies like HMH that have super hot tools that allow for a lot of digital interaction. Definitely not flat digital curriculum, but fully loaded. Okay, then you have other people in the mobile space that are allowing interactivity well beyond just sort of the old social media style stuff. And then you have a lot of impacts happening because of what's going on with this digital. So as that ton more digital courseware impacts, and this is for all you hardware companies and you networking companies out there, as the digital courseware comes in, you're going to see a lot of device and network impact. People are already going, well, we bought all these Chromebooks, but now we're sort of rethinking our pattern. We might need to do iPads at the lower grade level. We might need to do full laptops with actually a lot of memory for the upper grades. There's different sort of levels that people are starting to talk about, and the network impacts are huge, particularly because of all the streaming. There's also something that happens with regards to lots of discussions about homework and equity gap. That happens because in a lot of school districts, there are kids that have to take these devices home so they can do their homework, and they don't have network access, and that has to be solved. Then there's the whole remodeling for digital, where in some schools that I've visited, you've got kids that are laying around on their beanbag chairs. They're doing interesting things with, holding up their iPads and doing their reading at that time, and then other kids are at other spaces in the room. The remodeling for digital in the physical world is a major point of conversation. It's part of the impact of all of this. So another thing I want to show you is that there's an evolving scale of digital equity from that networking component. So Ruckus actually helped us do this evolving scale of digital equity to show you kind of where the national market is right now in terms of networks. The market right now, 80% of it is only through stage 2 of development. When the market starts really imbuing itself with a lot more digital curriculum, it's going to move all the way up to those final stages, which is going to be sort of a ecosystem-wide of access that's going to be needed and wanted. This is something you should definitely study if you're in a networking business. And then there is a natural endpoint for the education sector transformation, and this is something the Learning Council talks about in our whole tour. It's what we talk about with our online site. I talk about this a lot in the book. But this one statement, that there is a natural endpoint for the education sector's transformation, is a gift that people love to hear in education. They like to know they're going somewhere. There's a whole lot of people shoving a lot of stuff at them, and they really don't know what it all means in context. So the Learning Council is very earnest in trying to show what that context really is. So let me walk you through that really quick in case you've never heard it. If you're in the vendor industry side, you may not have heard us say this, but the education side hears this a lot. So we're walking through these natural transformation points that have already happened in other industries, and we're predicting they're happening at a certain rate of change in education, and we've been true to form so far. In fact, we've started to hear people in Tampa talk about that third stage that you're seeing on your screen right now, sustainability, back in September of 2016. So we knew we were right on point because in 2017 we started talking about sustainability as the primary point of what we discuss in all of our events. Most school districts, when they first started with their quote-unquote strategy, they were throwing devices in. They really didn't have a software strategy and how this would affect the actual curriculum for how you were going to use all the devices. So they sort of had to backtrack into strategy because devices are really a mere tactic. So after they got a real strategy going, then they leveled up to tactics, and they usually do that for a couple of years in every district. Then they hit this wall of unsustainability. They haven't really moved budgets. It's kind of messy. They don't really know what's going on. And then after they finally get through that, they'll hit analytics, which is what we're already starting to coalesce together for a conversation coming in 2018. Then they'll hit redesign or design to actually make themselves relevant in the present economy, which is to become part of the experience economy or expo centers of learning. So those are the stages. The end point of becoming an expositional center of learning is both a virtual and physical environment presence. But that presence will be entirely different than it is currently. It does not necessarily class structured. It's not necessarily as scheduled as it is today. It will be an entirely different view. So we want to make sure that we introduce that to you because it rings true for a lot of places, and there are some parts of this country that are already leading in that direction. There are some places that are already at the top of that scale. They're really exciting to talk about. The roadmap from the Learning Council, our special reports, and we always ask for sponsorship of these, is against that roadmap of change. So right now we're about to release our Digital Transition Sustainability special report. Back end of this year we'll be doing our analytics. And then early next year, our security one. We'll probably do the design one on how you remodel your environment, and then Expo Centers of Learning at the very end of that. So that's our roadmap. The other thing to know about us is we're doing a lot of publications in our journals, our journal poster projects. That's a beautiful poster that Ruckus actually sponsored. And then we do a lot of white papers for companies as well. We're specialists in thinking through exactly how to make your message fit this market because we're so embedded in it with our discussions about the digital curriculum shift. The events remaining in 2017 include San Diego, Denver, Los Angeles, New York City, Portland, Dallas, Indianapolis, Sacramento, Cheshire, Connecticut, which is replacing our original Boston event. We're still going to invite Boston up there. St. Louis, Missouri, Lake Las Vegas, Orlando, Florida, and then we're ending the year in Washington, D.C., just like we did last year, which was an amazing event. It was really, really a dynamic conversation this last year. So the other thing to know is we're actually launching these things called the learning groups. They're groups that are going really deep into the conversation of what's really going on with software, both from what's actually happening inside the software technologically that changes the pattern of teaching and learning and maybe changes the scheduling of the teaching and learning, changes the whole curriculum map, changes how you use resources, but also when you look at what's happening with digital curriculum, what that means for the overall school's relationship to how they're delivering learning. So I really think that the committees are going to get into some deep conversations. We've got leadership like Carla Burkholder out of Schertz-Cibolo Universal City Independent School District down by San Antonio. A couple of people from Houston, which is certainly one of the most progressive school districts in the country, have stepped into leadership roles for other committees. We have this new Learning Gaming Committee with Susie Wilsinski, who's the CEO of Dig It Games, who got the first National Science Foundation grant to actually start looking at standards within learning gaming so that there can be a framework for analytics coming out of them that everyone can trust. So this is the type of conversation that we're very much leading as the Learning Council, and I think if you're not already a member, you should try to become a member. The industry side, we do ask for a small membership fee. For the education side, it's free for everyone. The future projections, this is my favorite part. The future projections are from June to December 2017, the K12 market will be seeing a budget increase and spend will rise for digital curriculum, devices, and networks at a rate of 5% or greater. The lag is over, and new federal budgets won't impact the state increases very much, which are expected to jump in 2018 and 2019. What I mean by lag is, again, the fact that actual spend lags behind taxation collection. And we had a couple years here where the rate of inflation and the collections coming out of the market were pretty low. From June to December 2017, the higher ed market will continue to see lagging spend for digital curriculum while increasing greatly in system spend. That's just part of the personality of the higher ed market. So here's what's really fun, is that 2018 looks to be a definitive growth year on all fronts, with spend decisions being made between September 2017 and June 2018. The time to market heavily is now to impact the resurgence. Spend in digital courseware, courses, on-demand teaching services, and integration single sign-on solutions are expected to be the clear winners with as high as 50% growth. Other areas like networking for K12, data storage, data management, analytics, assessment, and general apps are estimated at an average of 20% growth. The other tech areas will have nominal growth, matching the rest of the economic growth, which is predicted to be better than it has been. That's what I have for you today. I want to thank you for listening. I want to ask you to reach out to us and ask any questions that you want to ask. Either email me or reach out to me by phone. We're happy to actually answer any questions. We're happy to give you a custom briefing if you need it. We really want your success to help drive education and all of learning success in America. So thank you for listening. We'll see you again.